Hi, I'm Paula Blumenfeld. I'm an artist and I painted this series of 18 Polish Jewish women who courageously fought the Nazis. It has been called Heroes of the Holocaust, Women Warriors. I don't care what you call these incredibly courageous women, just learn about what they did. They were amazing. These paintings were based, or inspired, I should say, by a book by Judy Battalion. It's called The Light of Days, and when I read it, my wheels started spinning. When I finished the book, I reached out to Judy. It took a little bit of time, a few months, before she realized I was a serious artist and not just a Sunday painter. And when she looked at the images, she started posting them on her blog. So we got acquainted on a number of occasions. I gave 2 talks in Westchester about the 9 paintings I had completed at that time, and she came, and that was the first time I met her. And then subsequently we did a conversation at Federation in New York City, which is where these paintings are being shown at the present time. Every story was so compelling. Every woman risked her life on a regular basis. And they were very young. They were from 15 or 16 through their 20s, most of them in their early 20s. And they had, many of them, grown up in very sheltered backgrounds. So to do the deeds they did was remarkable. As young as they were, as sheltered as they often were, to put their life on the line every day, trying to help and rescue other Jews was just remarkable. Their stories were so compelling. I felt like I had to paint all of these women. It was kind of an evolutionary process. The more I read and the more I learned, the more I was able to paint. I typically work on 2 paintings at a time, so if I get stuck on one, I go to the other. And I think the first 2 were Rania Kukielka, who is on the cover of Judy's book, The Light of Days, and then Heike Grossman. Rania is depicted in red with red lipstick and very fashionable clothing of the time, because she was a fashionista until the day she died. She loved clothing and makeup. Her last name, Kukielka, in Polish means a cuckoo bird. And so I've put 5 symbols of birds, cuckoo bird, in the paintings as well. She was incredibly brave. She was 15 or 16 when she started her work as a katzarit, connector, these Jewish women were called, because they, in many cases, besides smuggling bombs and arms, they connected the Jewish ghettos with information about what was going on and what the Nazis were actually doing, so they could plan uprising and action to fight the Nazis. I had to do some archival research also. Polish archives, there's Jewish women's archives, there's Yad Vashem archives in Israel. There are numerous sources, and I looked at many. There's very little in the way of photographs of these women at the time. They masqueraded as Polish Gentiles, and there are a few photographs of them from that time, or sometimes high school pictures, pictures of them pretending to be Gentiles on the streets of Warsaw or whatever city they were in Poland. There's one picture of 3 of them who are posing together at a Nazi party they were invited to. I mean, it's really remarkable when you think of it. I mean, they infiltrated at every level. They were amazing. Jewish women in Poland were able to fulfill this role in ways men were not. First of all, they were able to be flirtatious, especially if they didn't appear to be Jewish. And then the other way they were able to do this was they had no physical signs of being Jewish. Men could be asked to drop their pants in an instant and they would be known to be Jewish. Women didn't have that impediment. They worked in networks, and they worked with men who were also involved in the networks. The men were much more well-known. What was interesting was these women were able to connect not just with each other and with all the resistance groups, they also connected with Russian and Polish partisans who were actually often anti-Semitic, and sometimes they had to hide the fact they were Jewish in their roles there, but they did manage to connect. They sent notices. They had a very active and involved secretive network by which they communicated. They had symbols for warning Jewish communities about what was going on, and the symbols were not understandable to someone outside the network, but they were understood in the Jewish communities. Among the first was one about Frumka Plotnicka, and she sent missives, letters to the various Jewish communities, warning them of pogroms, of massacres, of what was going on in other places. She typically used Hebrew words to describe what was happening, which were not understood by the Nazis or the Poles. Most of the women I painted survived, but probably a third of them did not. And for those who did not, I symbolized that by not finishing the painting. It's finished, but I left it unfinished. Typically, you'll see dripping paint, areas that are incomplete or not painted. And all but 2 of those who survived immigrated to Israel. I chose the number 18 based both on pictorial information and the fact that 18 is the Hebrew word for life, which is chai, and I wanted to bring these women back to life. My father was a Polish Jew and a Holocaust survivor. He was the youngest of 10 siblings. They were all married with children, except for him, and he was the only survivor after the Holocaust. And I often wondered, and sometimes still do, what I would have done had I been alive at this time. I speak foreign languages. I'm told I do not look Jewish, whatever that means. And I would like to think I would have done something. It's hard to tell not having been there, but I would like to think that. So their stories really resonated with me on a very personal level. In our present time with the war in Gaza, people have to stand up and speak out against atrocity. And it also reinforces for me how vulnerable the Jewish people are. I identify very strongly as a Jewish woman, and I will not be quiet about this. My little map of Israel and my Star of David, which was my mother's, which she got in Israel. In case you miss one, you see the other. I hope that people will be inspired, and particularly women. Women aren't typically thought of as fighters. I'm going to also be doing a virtual program for the Museum of Jewish Heritage for Women's History Month in March, and I think it's really important to acknowledge them as women. During the pandemic, I was working from me. I was doing a series of self-portraits. I did 6 self-portraits because I was the most available subject around. I have worked both figuratively and abstractly, and I finished this series about little less than 2 months ago, and I've started on some very large abstract paintings. And I'm still thinking about my next series.